Well, the farther out in time you go, the greater the variance and the greater the error estimation.
No, but I mean, a similar model is right. Is global warming not just changing mean, but changing how variable things are?
Oh, yeah, that there are predictions about that. For example, precipitation variance is predicted to increase within a given year, and the extremes of precipitation amount. Temperature, I think, is more of a gradual change, but that I think you'd have to really look into the climate literature to answer that precisely.
Those results are even more uncertain than the just temperature change results. So
we just needed to have predictions that were basically good predictions that were well respected, that we could fit into our model, feed in to look at the impact on yields. And so these seem to me to be the best choice. There are some models that have more spatially specific predictions, but they have a higher error measurement because they're going down below the Southeast Asia level, grid cell predictions. But we decided, at least as a first pass, to just use this ensemble mean.
Just to follow up on the question I asked before again, sorry. So I guess it would be nice to see if you could show that historically the local farmer economy doesn't respond too much to changes in the global economy, because then you can argue that it doesn't go both ways.
Yeah.
And then, so
that could be the next paper.
I guess you could just look at historical data and make some sort of an argument that the growing habits of the guys doesn't change too much as the. I mean, it's probably even true that they've been growing rice there for the last 50 years, right? It's not that
with the historical data we have so far, it is true, because that province, it was very rural, growing rice, 50 years ago, and they still do it. It's still there.
And then you can somehow argue that maybe that's still going to be true in the future.
Right, and we're not looking, 100 years into the future. We're considering 50 years.
But why do you look into the future?
For climate change, because the climate change will have
to change the distributions of these predicted yields, or I think
what he's asking is, he's getting at, we know the climate's going to change. We know that the biophysical response of the crops to the climate changes is going to.
Yeah, I know. He just tries to close the loop, right? That's
he's asking how
I don't want to
farmers
close the loop. Yeah, I wanted the causality to only go one way, not the other way around, because then otherwise you can't identify anything. No, I mean, I think you got it.
I mean, that really would be like a next paper. Let's then take this. Let's look at how farmers might adapt, and then feed it back in.
Well, but I mean, things like technological change can be included, and probably are included in the production functions of the farmers, right? I mean, it's assumed that they're going to have better farming practices at some.
Not really. I mean, they are just discovering the function, right? They are just building the function.
We make adjustments. We can account for adjustments in the amounts of inputs used, but we don't introduce any new inputs, or we don't, consider the change in the productivity of inputs. For example, if new seeds, new rice varieties are derived, or new fertilizers are derived, something like this. So that kind of technological change we do not take into account. And in our defense, we can use Benny's argument. So far, the kind of technological advancement level that was used in rice production in northeastern Thailand is not very sophisticated. It's pretty basic. They hardly use any machinery at all. They use similar types of fertilizers and seeds here and here.
No irrigation.
No irrigation. So from that, we can assume that if there are technological changes, they'll be kind of slow, or changes to the production.
So the yield per acre for the last 50 years is pretty much constant, or just?
That's what we're going to get. And okay, this is just a brief outline how we integrate the models John was talking about with the economic models. So first we simulate this out with actual data on inputs and weather for 1,030 plot observations. And just to clarify, this set uses data on all non-labor inputs that we include in the model, but it does not account for any labor inputs, so it does not account for the effects of operations that use only labor inputs, such as weeding, for example. Then we use these set simulations to estimate economic model, again with actual data on inputs and weather, for all 1,030 observations. And this estimation gives us a function of final yield as a function of inputs, and also it gives us equations for amounts of inputs that farmer will use as a function of weather, like rainfall expectation shocks and previous intermediate output. Then we do weather simulations for 100 weather simulations for 3 climate scenarios that John talked about: neutral, high emissions, and low emissions. And we take a random subsample of 100 plots from our 1,030 overall sample, and we resimulate DSAT for these 100 plots for each of the 300 weather realizations. And then we feed this DSAT output and new expectations of rainfalls based on the different 300 weather realizations into the economic model that we estimated in step 2. And this gives us predictions in changes in rice yields, not only due to changes in climate, but also due to changes in the input amount used because of the changes in expected rainfall. So again, for example, the difference between predictions of rice yields, DSAT predictions in step 4, from model predictions in step 5, in that DSAT takes into account only kind of external effect of weather change on rice yields, but it doesn't change amounts of inputs used. It uses actual inputs that we see in our data. Whereas in step 5, model takes into account not only external effect of climate change on yield, but also changes in the amounts of inputs that farmers will make. And okay, before I present results, I'll really quickly summarize the 3 climate scenarios we're considering. So this compares daily precipitation in millimeters. For each month, first column gives the daily mean, and the next columns give percentage change under high and low emission scenario. So what we see that under low emission scenario, rainfall increases throughout the year. Whereas under high emission scenario, there is actually less rainfall in the second half of the year, starting in June, which is exactly when rice cultivation takes place in Thailand. And we did statistical tests for the significance of these differences, and they're all very highly statistically significant. And also note that although rainfall increases throughout the year under low emission scenario, the magnitude of increase is particularly large in December and January. And that's actually the end of production process. That's when rice is already mature and farmers harvest the rice. Next, we'll look at the average daily temperature during daylight hours in centigrade. And again, this is average daily mean, and this is a percent change under climate scenarios. And we see that daily temperature increases under both high and low emission scenario. But the magnitude of increase is much higher under high emission scenario. Like many months, it's actually almost 40% higher.